Chapter 2: The Big Cycle of Money, Credit, Debt and Economic Activity. The timeless and universal fundamentals of money and credit. All entities, people, companies, non-profit organizations, and governments deal with the same basic financial realities, and always have. They have money that comes in, i.e., revenue, and money that goes out, i.e., expenses, which, when netted, makes up their net income. If one borrowed too much money, and needs to pay it back, the income falls below the amount one needs to pay out to cover the total of one's expenses. One will have to cut one's expenses or will default/restructure one's debts. Since one person's spending is another person's income, that cutting of expenses will hurt not just the entity that is having to cut those expenses, but it will hurt the ones who depend on that spending to earn income. Similarly, since one's debts are another's assets, that defaulting on debts reduces other entities' assets, which requires them to cut their spending. As a principle, debt eats equity. What I mean by that is that for most systems, when the rules of the game are followed, debts have to be paid above all else, so that when one has equity ownership, for example, in one's investment portfolio or in one's house, and one can't service the debt, the asset will be sold or taken away. However, unlike what most people intuitively think, there isn't a fixed amount of money and credit in existence. Money and credit can easily be created by governments. The problem is that it creates a lot of debt, and paying it back is difficult and painful. Since government has the abilities to both make and borrow money, why couldn't the central bank lend money at an interest rate of about 0% to others at low rates and allow those debtors to never pay it back? Central banks could do that. In fact, that is what is now happening. If you look carefully, you will be able to identify those who look rich but are in financial trouble because they have incomes that are below their expenses or liabilities that are greater than their assets. So, if you project out what will likely happen to their finances, you will see that they will have to cut their expenses and sell their assets in painful ways that will leave them broke. All countries can create money and credit out of thin air to give to people to spend or to lend it out. By producing money and giving it to debtors in need, central banks can prevent the debt crisis. But creating money or credit is not the same as creating wealth. There will be a consequence. What is money? Money is a medium of exchange that can also be used as a storehold of wealth. So, it's important to realize that most money and credit, especially the fiat money that now exists, has no intrinsic value. It is just journal entries in an accounting system that can easily be changed. The purpose of that system is to help to allocate resources efficiently so that productivity can grow, rewarding both lenders and borrowers, and that system periodically breaks down. As a result, since the beginning of time, all currencies have either been destroyed or devalued. When currencies are destroyed or devalued, that shifts wealth in a big way that sends big reverberations through the economy and markets. The fundamentals. While money and credit are associated with wealth, they aren't wealth. Because money and credit can buy wealth, i.e., goods and services, the amount of money and credit one has and the amount of wealth one has look pretty much the same. However, that increase in wealth, via credit, is more an illusion than a reality for two reasons. The increased credit that pushes prices and production up has to be paid back, which, all things being equal, will have the opposite effect when it has to be paid back, and the intrinsic value of things doesn't increase just because their prices go up. Think about it this way: if you own a house and the government creates a lot of money and credit and the price of your house goes up, you will still own the same house, i.e., your actual wealth hasn't increased, just your calculated wealth has increased. As far as how the economic machine works, the big thing is that money and credit is stimulative when it's given out and depressing when it has to be paid back. That's what normally makes money, credit, and economic growth so cyclical. In other words, the long-term debt cycle runs from low debt and debt burdens, which gives those who control money and credit growth plenty of capacity to create debt and with it to create buying power for borrowers and a high likelihood that the lender who is holding debt assets will get repaid with good real returns, to high debt and debt burdens with little capacity to create buying power for borrowers and a low likelihood that the lender will be repaid with good returns. At the end of the long-term debt cycle, there is essentially no more stimulant in the bottle, i.e., no more ability of central bankers to extend the debt cycle, so there needs to be a debt restructuring or debt devaluation to reduce the debt burdens and start this cycle over again. The long-term debt cycle in summary. For thousands of years there have always been three types of monetary system. Hard money, for example, metal coins. Paper money claims on hard money. Fiat money, for example, the US dollar today. The below diagram conveys these different transitions. There are many historical examples, from the Song dynasty to Weimar Germany, of countries making the full transition from constrained types, Type 1 and Type 2, to fiat money, then back to a constrained currency as the old fiat currency hyperinflates. As noted earlier, this big debt cycle plays out over the long term, something like 50 to 75 years, and, at its end, is characterized by a restructuring of debts and of the monetary system. The abrupt parts of these restructurings, i.e., the debt and currency crisis periods, typically happen quickly, lasting only months to up to 3 years, depending on how long it takes the governments to exercise these moves. In summary, how the big cycle of money, credit, debt and economic activity fits in with the big domestic and international political cycles to affect the world order. Stepping back to look at all of this from the big picture level, what I'm saying about the relationship between 1. The economic part, i.e., money, credit, debt, economic activity, and wealth, and 2. The political part, both within countries and between countries, of rises and declines, looks like the picture shown below. The cycle that I am describing is conveyed in the chart below. While no cycle goes exactly this way, almost all of them by and large go that way. This explanation of money and credit will be followed, and how all currencies devalue and die, with references to the most important cases of the last 500 years. End of Chapter 2.